Okay. So, all right. So let's go to unprovoked. Now, here's a mystery. This could have happened at any time over the last 20 years or any time into the future over the next 20 years, but it happened now. And there are accusations of all sorts flying around on the political front in the West about why now. As far as you're concerned, why now? And is there a lesson in the fact that it's now for us? So I'll go into this a little deeper. I read a couple of papers by Victor Davis Hanson yesterday, and he made a claim that was approximately the following, which is that the Democrats, for example, under Obama, talked about Russia in a negative way, but really didn't do anything about Russia, whereas Trump gave Putin flattery in some sense, but actually did something about the potential danger they posed. And I'm not claiming that that's a valid argument or an invalid argument. It's just something that I read when I was trying to prepare for this. Why now? Because it is being politicized like mad in the West. We think, well, Putin is taking advantage of our perceived weakness, and there's partisan reasons for that, and maybe there's deeper philosophical reasons for that. Those need to be separated. As far as you're concerned, why now? And then we do need to get to also maybe how we stepped into this, even if it was only 20% our fault or 2%, I don't care. What did we do wrong that made this happen and happen now?
So look, the answer to the question why now is very hard, I think, and this is something that I'm also wrestling with, because what we need to explain is the invasion. That Putin has been carrying forward operations to regain control of Ukraine since 2014. He has been pursuing hybrid warfare approaches. He's been pursuing informational operation approaches in Ukraine. He's put various forms of military pressure on Ukraine from his occupied territories.
Right. So it's not exactly now. This is actually an extension of a process that's been occurring for a long time.
It's an inflection in that process. Now, so what we need to explain this particular inflection, which is a huge inflection, but that's actually rather hard, to be honest with you. And there's no simple partisan or straightforward explanation to why Putin decided that he needed to invade now, which is the question that preoccupies me as someone who's focused on Putin's calculus.
Well, the best explanation I've heard so far, and it goes along with this gradualist idea in some sense, is that part of what Putin did while he was attempting to wrest back control of Ukraine, let's say, is build a military presence on the border. Yeah. And then the fact that you've done that actually changes the situation substantially. If you're going to you're much more likely to shoot someone with a gun if you happen to be holding it and pointing it at them as a precursor. And so you could see how a gradualist approach, and his initial idea might have just been, well, we'll build up the military to put even more pressure on the West and to continue this gradualist approach. But once it's there, the situation changes. And then it could be, in some sense, relatively small and relatively random events that precipitate it at any given moment.
So I think it's quite possible that something like that occurred. There's a lot of technical details about, so I want to say on the air to you what I've been saying to other people that I talk to. I got this wrong. Okay, we made a forecast. I and the ISW Russia team made a forecast beginning in November and then carrying forward until very recently that Putin would not launch this huge invasion. And we were wrong. Obviously, he did. And I, as a matter of analytical integrity, I feel it necessary to say to people explicitly, yes, we were wrong in our forecast. And we've spent a lot of time trying to understand and think about why we were wrong and what lessons we can learn from that. Here's one of the reasons why we were wrong. Or let me say, this is one of the reasons why we forecast that he would not do this. Because when you look actually at the technical details of the way that he arrayed his forces around Ukraine, we were watching that and saying, this is going to stink, this military operation that he's conducting. He's not well set up to do this. Surely his professional military officers are going to tell him that this is a bad idea. And it turns out that we were wrong that he would be persuaded by that reality, but we were right that it was a bad idea. because the problems that he's now encountering, we actually did predict that he would have the problems that he's now encountering if he conducted this operation.
Okay, so it isn't obvious what precipitated this, and there isn't an obvious moral to derive from the story, but there are errors in it. And okay, sorry, go ahead.
We'll get to errors, but before we get to our own errors, because I've got to tell you, Jordan, it's one of the things that I'm very focused on is you need to start by blaming the enemy for things the enemy does. I'm happy to talk about what our responsibilities are here, but this was all Putin's decision.
I'm actually more interested in some sense now what our responsibilities are going forward.
Okay.
Right. So because that's the crucial issue. And I'd like to hear. When I commented about mistakes, then I was thinking you said his troops were badly positioned, his military machine was badly positioned, and so that might mean he was setting it up for other reasons, but defaulted to this.
Right. Why did that happen?
What is the situation he's in now? Because he's not finding allies at that rapid a rate, let's say.
No, he's not finding really allies at all. Look, the first thing I want to say is I think it's quite possible that he decided to launch this invasion because the intent of the mobilization, I think it is possible, the intent of the mobilization was to intimidate both the Ukrainians and the West into surrendering without having to invade. And that he therefore, allowed his military guys to set up a deployment that didn't make sense for an invasion, but was great for threatening. One of the things that happened, the Biden administration deserves a lot of credit for at least one thing that it's done, actually for a few things that it's done, deserves some criticism for other things, but for the first time in history that I'm aware of, the Biden administration fought a counter-hybrid warfare campaign back against the Russians. And as the Biden administration became aware of Russian preparations to conduct a coup d'etat in Kyiv, they told the Ukrainians about it, and they told the world about it. As they became aware of multiple Russian preparations to conduct false flag attacks or stage Ukrainian provocations or various other things that would have given Putin informational cover and created a who really knows effect in the minds of people in the West, the Biden administration blew every one of those operations.
Okay, so why is that a hybrid warfare response on Biden's part, and not just, I don't mean just, but not just the utility of straightforwardness and honesty as a response to disinformation and propaganda?
It's both.
Or it's both. Okay.
It's both.
Why both?
We can wage war with the truth because we're not trying to lie. Putin is trying to create a false universe. Putin is trying to create a fictitious universe, and the Biden administration punctured that. I'm calling it hybrid warfare because they reacted to, first of all, Putin engaged in violence, which makes it, politically motivated violence, which makes it warfare. And his guys were conducting deliberate information campaigns to support specific preparations for military activities. And the Biden administration engaged game for game with them on a very tactical level. So it wasn't just sort of blanket telling the truth. It was finding
strategic as well.
Strategic and tactical, blowing all of this
informed.
Cover. Yeah. And you can, by the way, see, I have a little artifact that suggests that this was true because Putin held one of his weirdly publicly staged, National Security Council meetings on Monday. And one of the things that happened was he absolutely humiliated the guy who is the head of his foreign intelligence agency that would have been responsible for a lot of these operations. I mean, he humiliated the guy in public in a way that we've never seen him do before. And I think he probably was genuinely angry that the guy had allowed the Biden administration to get inside all of these operations. And I'm hypothesizing that Putin decided, in the face of having all of this cover blown, decided that he was just going to go for it instead of waiting for this guy Naryshkin or somebody else to get something. Putin just said, okay, screw it. We've got the forces. I'm tired of this. We're just going to do this. And I don't care that we don't have the informational cover. So frustration and anger in response possibly to the success of the Biden administration sort of defeating all the informational stuff.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting explanation for a tipping point, and certainly not an expected one. So you've covered unprovoked, unwarranted, and illegal, I would say, and we've covered territorial ambitions or political ambitions, and we've talked a lot about reconstituting the Soviet Empire, let's say, or something approximating that. do you think so let's switch to something else. Is what he's how do you assess the success of what he's doing from a military and a political perspective? Has he miscalculated? What's the situation on the ground in the Ukraine? How are the Ukrainians resisting? How are other countries responding? Like, what's the situation in your estimation?
So I'm going to lead by saying the Russian military is so much stronger than the Ukrainian military writ large that the odds remain high that the Russian military will be able ultimately to overwhelm the Ukrainian defenses and take control of Kyiv and so forth. I don't want to offer an optimistic take here because we're still early days in this war and the power imbalance is just so great. But that having been said, I would never have expected to be sitting here 4 days into the Russian military operation with Russian troops just messing around on the outskirts of Kyiv, just finally getting into Kharkiv and struggling all up and down. I would never have expected that to happen, except that we did expect it to be a mess when they tried to do an invasion with the force packages that they had put together, especially those that are attacking Kyiv and Kharkiv. So a few things have gone on. One is this was a stupid way of preparing for an invasion if you were serious about an invasion. I give you all.
In what way? Yeah, give some details. I think that'd be interesting.
So here's the thing. Mechanized maneuver warfare is a very complicated undertaking.
Logistically.
Well, yes, logistically, but even more than that in terms of command and control. When you are a commander and you've got multiple battalions, mechanized battalions moving down multiple axes of advance, sort of driving down different roads to different targets rapidly. Keeping track of all of that is very hard. Understanding what they're doing is very hard. Figuring out how to support them is very hard. They need artillery support. They need air support. They do need logistics support. You need to tell them what to do as they get to or as they run into problems. It's a lot of burden on a commander to keep track of a lot of subordinates. So the solution for, as long as there's been mechanized warfare, is that you build forces where you never have more than 2 or 3 or maximum 4 direct subordinate units like that. So battalions get grouped into regiments or brigades, which are at the same echelon in an organizational structure. And there will be not more than 4 maneuvering battalions or mechanized battalions within a mechanized regiment or a mechanized brigade. And then brigades and regiments get grouped into divisions. So there's not going to be more than 3 or 4 brigades or regiments in a division. And then the divisions are grouped into larger organizations. And this is the way the US military is organized, and it's the way the Russian military is organized formally. But the weird thing is that when they put these masses of forces into Belarus and into Western Russia that are now attacking Kyiv, and when they built up forces opposite Kharkiv, they didn't move entire regiments or brigades, let alone entire divisions. They pulled individual battalion, what they call battalion tactical groups, BTGs. They pulled individual BTGs from all across Russia. The guys in Belarus actually came from 10 or 15 different regiments and brigades in the Russian Far East.
And did they do that to not weaken those divisions and brigades where they were already located?
No, because all the stuff in Belarus is coming in a place where the Russians don't need to worry about. The Chinese are not invading the Russian Far East, so the Russians could have taken whole regiments or brigades from the Far East if they'd wanted to, and they didn't. I can offer various technical explanations for why they might not have. But the point is that they put together what we're calling just sort of collection of cats and dogs of battalions wung together from a whole bunch of other parent units, not organized coherently, even on the spot, as far as we can tell, into clear regiment brigade structures and all like that. And then they just sort of told them, go down, drive down the road and go take Kyiv. Okay, that gets you the kind of mess that they have now, where they try to, individual battalion tactical groups drive down and then they get stopped, but then there's not a good coordination so that there's not an immediate other battalion that can take over and flank and keep the attack moving. There are all kinds of ways of dealing with the defenses the Ukrainians are putting up, and the Russians are not using them. And I think that has a lot to do with the organization of the Russian forces. It was just crazy as an organization for a mechanized operation like this.
And then Putin assumed that just brute force numbers, in some sense, would overcome that
possibly
that disarray in organizational structure.
Possibly, but I think another answer goes to your second question. The Ukrainians are fighting like lions. They are fighting like heroes. It's unbelievable, the determination with which I thought they would fight. I mean, I know Ukrainians, and I thought that they would fight. They are fighting hard and effectively. I'm certain that Putin did not expect them to.
Okay, so he's having a lot more trouble locally than he might have expected for a multitude of reasons. Right. Poor organization to begin with, which seems in keeping with the notion that the troops were put there as an intimidation rather than as a reliable military force for an invasion. Yep, sure. All this is provisional. And also the Ukrainians are entrenching and fighting back with a ferocity that was unexpected.
To him,
they have more to lose in some sense than the Russians have to gain. So that's always dangerous. That's a dangerous inequality in morality in warfare, and that's not to be underestimated. And so what's happening on the international front in response to the cohesiveness of the response to the invasion?
This has been very heartening, and it goes to one of the other reasons why I thought Putin wouldn't do this, because the international community is rallying. And we can have frustrations with the way individual states are responding to specific requests and so forth, and I have been frustrated by that, as everybody else has been. But the truth is, if you get out of the time-dilated world we're in which if something doesn't happen 5 seconds from now, then it's taking a long time. We're talking about within 3 to 4 days, we've got the Russians being partially kicked out of SWIFT. We've got sanctions on the Russian central bank. We've got the Germans, for the first time since the Second World War, directly sending lethal aid to the Ukrainians. We've got virtual unanimity in condemning the Russian attack.
Are there any exceptions?
Yes.
And I want to go back to SWIFT as well.
Okay. Yes, there are exceptions. Bashar al-Assad continues to demonstrate what an evil slimeball he actually is and how much he owes the Russians, because he immediately recognized the Russian recognition of Donbass, of Donetsk and Luhansk.
And for those that don't know, he is
the dictator of Syria, who has been conducting his own little genocide there with Russian active assistance.
Right. So he's just the kind of ally you'd hope the Russians would have.
Exactly. I haven't tracked this. I think the Venezuelans have made good noises. Again, when Maduro's on your side, you ought to be thinking hard about your life choices. And the Iranian, what they call the axis of resistance, I think, was very prompt in recognizing the recognition of republics. And the Iranians are generally focused on blaming NATO for the Russian invasion of Ukraine.